Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up and working with our launch control in conjunction with anti-lag to build a regulated amount of boost off the line for a turbocharged engine. This is a specific strategy for turbochargers only, so if you're naturally aspirated or supercharged, what we're going to learn here in this training module is not going to be applicable. What we're going to do here is move from our fuel page and we're going to jump over into our launch control specific page and start to set up some configuration details and some programming so that we can see how this strategy is going to work. It's actually really simple, but extremely effective. What we're going to do here is go across over here to launch control. Let's go into our window here, and then we're going to move into our launch mode. Now, here's where we need to decide if we want a singular launch RPM value or we want to move into a 3D launch RPM table. We talked about the 3D launch RPM table in our last training module that can give us a lot of flexibility, a lot of different strategies that we can program in here. What I'm going to do is actually use the 3D launch RPM table for this example because I'm going to integrate a trim pot, which is going to allow me to vary my launch RPM and being able to do that on the fly while I'm sitting in the cockpit of the actual vehicle. That gives the driver a lot of flexibility. You could just simply set this for single launch RPM. That just makes it a little bit more simplistic. But for right now, let's just do 3D launch RPM table and click OK. Here I'm going to say yes to put the default values into our launch RPM table. Now what I'm going to do quickly is just set up and go through some of our conditions here in order for this to work. So the first thing for the activation mode, I am going to go here and say always on. And then I'm also going to make sure I have my disarming speed set for a reasonable mile per hour. Now the disarming speed will turn off based on your driven wheel speed. In my case, I'm a front wheel drive vehicle, so my driven wheel speed would have been my rear wheels. So one of the wheel speed sensors wired into the link and designated as my rear wheel. I'll set this to something relatively low, probably something like 1 to 2 miles per hour. That way it turns off as soon as the cars start to actually move off the line. Again, going back to VSS gear, I have it set here for my right rear wheel speed sensor. To use that, I've calibrated and configured this already. I've pointed the driven wheel speed source to the right rear wheel speed. And because I only have a singular source coming in here for speed to the link at this point, I'm going to say my acceleration source is set to my driven wheel speed as well. Normally this would be set to driving wheel speed, but in this case we're doing driven because I only have one speed source. Now going back here to the launch control, I set my disarming speed. I'm going to set my throttle position activation. This is pretty standard here. We're going to set this relatively high, something like 50% throttle for my launch control to activate. So we can go ahead and just set up these basic conditions. So 50% throttle and higher, activate the launch control, 2 miles per hour and lower launch controls activated and armed. And then if we go over 2 miles per hour, it shuts off. We have an arming time, which we typically want to leave here at 0 seconds. We don't want to wait for a delay for this to turn on. We want it immediately turning on. We have a fuel trim table, and in this case, we will turn this on. We're going to learn how we can integrate this because on a turbocharged engine, we want to go in and add additional fuel when we're hitting a certain boost range, and we can configure the table in a specific manner so that we are adding some additional fuel, because typically we run lean when we're going in, getting on the limiter, and we don't want the EGTs to get excessively high. So by using a fuel adder table, we can control the EGTs a little bit better and not get the exhaust valve so hot and get the turbocharger and manifold so hot. What we are finding here, if I go in to the launch ignition retard, it looks like it populated the launch control fuel percent table here and not into the launch fuel trim window here. So let's actually unlock and go to our launch fuel trim, double click, and that'll bring that into the window here. We're going to go ahead and lock that, and then we're going to have to go ahead and fix our launch ignition retard window here because that's our launch fuel controls found in both windows. That's not ideal. I'm actually going to unlock this in the anticipation of actually turning on the 3D table. So we've set up our basic conditions here for the launch control to actually work. That's going to be based 3-dimensional table here, and then we have our fuel table to add additional fuel when we're on the launch control. Now taking a look at this further, we have our launch ignition area here. Ignition retard adjust mode. We're going to change this from single zone to table. Click OK, click yes. And what we're going to do here is jump down because we have this window unlocked. We want our ignition retard table to appear here under the launch ignition retard window. Double click, that should change that. Yep, it did. Let's go ahead and lock it. So there is a little bit of software quirks that happen sometimes when you're turning things on. Just pay attention to what's populating in the actual window here. So even though that was launch ignition retard, the fuel table actually popped up here, which definitely could be confusing. So we have these in their correct place. The next thing we have here is our ignition retard mode. This is the degrees absolute or degrees option that we have to select. What this is saying is that either we're going to go ahead and call out the actual ignition time we want to run, so we bypass whatever the spark timing is commanded from our main spark timing table, or if we choose degrees option, this will add or subtract against our main spark timing table. So the absolute calls out the absolute time we want to run. The degrees goes in and allows us to offset the spark timing again from our main spark timing table. What we're going to do here, it doesn't really matter which one you choose, but I'm going to go ahead and just use degrees absolute when I'm commanding and working with this. Find it might be a little bit less confusing, a little bit less back and forth trying to figure out what did I command in spark timing for my table, and then how much do I need to actually pull out of my ignition retard table here. So I'll go to absolute. This allows me to command the absolute timing that I want to actually run. Let's click OK.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.